The global community has long called for a ceasefire in Gaza, but true peace remains elusive. Even if a ceasefire is achieved, one critical question remains: how long will it last? Our vision for Gaza extends beyond temporary fixes. It centers on a comprehensive Gaza Marshall Plan that fosters lasting peace through collaborative, inclusive decision-making. Smartsettle Infinity brings all parties to the table, ensuring that every voice is heard and leading to a truly optimal and sustainable consensus. This video will use a simulation of a hypothetical negotiation to illustrate such an approach, where we are not just aiming for an agreement, but for a transformative process where trust is built and conflict resolution becomes sustainable. Instead of waging war, we must focus on waging peace and building collaboration. At the heart of this approach is Smartsettle Infinity, which embraces the vision of conflict resolution through peaceful, collaborative, and intelligent methods. If you ask someone how the war in the Middle East could end, they might predict that Israel will win on the right side of this graph. Israel is obviously the stronger party, and the destruction that is happening is primarily on Hamas territory. Others will say that Hamas will win because of the international support they have generated and accusations of genocide. Yet this violence extends far beyond the conflict between Israel and Hamas, entangling many sides, all of which are losing, no matter how you look at it. Other paths to peace are represented by this orange arrow. There is discussion of a Gaza Marshall Plan, yet bringing all the necessary parties to the table is daunting. Without the right approach, we risk remaining trapped in a dangerous Nash equilibrium. Describing the Nash equilibrium as a deadlock where no one wins, won John Nash a Nobel Prize. But he didn't stop there. Nash also devised a way to escape this deadlock, known as maximize the utility product. This algorithm reshapes the problem from a win-lose dynamic into a multi-dimensional approach where it's possible for all sides to achieve gains. Assuming only two parties, we're now looking at the problem in two-dimensional satisfaction space. We've relabeled Hamas as Palestine to represent a bigger picture. They want to be at the top of this graph, while Israel wants to be at the right side. Now, it's no longer true that one party must lose when the other one gains. Smartsettle employs a similar algorithm, maximize the minimum gain, which some experts consider as a superior alternative to Nash's method. Another name for this methodology is integrative negotiation. It applies to negotiations among any number of parties, but this algorithm is not enough. Nash also prescribed collaboration as part of the solution, though he didn't explain how to bring parties together. In this presentation, I'm going to describe a methodology for collaboration facilitated by Smartsettle Infinity, but I'll also be the first to admit that even if we think we know how to do it, this will be no easy task. So, who are the parties we need to bring on board to negotiate a Gaza Marshall Plan? There are many. For the sake of this simulation, we've organized the stakeholders into 6 groups. The Smartsettle collaboration process provides a groundbreaking platform for all parties, transforming traditional negotiation into a dynamic, cooperative experience. It starts with all these parties working together to create a single negotiating framework. This framework is like the final agreement, except for blanks representing issues still to be negotiated. With the help of wise mediators and skilled facilitators assisted by AI, collaborative stakeholders can build a single negotiating framework. This process redirects criticism away from the other parties and toward the single negotiating framework and mediators. This helps to reinforce collaboration, and the result is a comprehensive framework in short order. Once the parties have crafted a version of the single negotiating framework that reflects shared interests, they can begin modeling the problem within Smartsettle Infinity. This collaborative process helps the framework evolve through multiple iterations, ultimately leading to the best possible outcome. In this case, a comprehensive Gaza Marshall Plan. Next, I'm going to describe in more detail the process depicted on this diagram. Building a single negotiating framework is the beginning of the modeling phase. This is a time to build and/or strengthen relationships. The parties can be physically face-to-face or meet virtually from opposite sides of the earth. The objective of this phase is for each stakeholder to bring all their issues to the table. No bargaining or formal exchange of proposals takes place during this phase, but the discussion will identify the range of possible outcomes on each issue. In our simulation, the 6 groups identified 10 broad categories that would include everything they care about in a comprehensive Gaza Marshall Plan. We're not going to take time to discuss these in any detail, but let's focus for a moment on the commitment to ceasefire. In the ceasefire category, the parties found significant common ground. They also identified 6 key options to consider moving forward. In a real negotiation, there would be much more detail than shown here. Each option is associated with a budget in billions of dollars. The simulation assumes stakeholders share costs in proportion to their GDP. For every dollar contributed by the Palestinians, the other parties contribute proportionally more. As the single negotiating framework evolves, the parties begin to model that framework within Infinity, which includes a preference representation for each of them. Each party does that separately. Any number of parties can be accommodated this way until they're all satisfied with the single negotiating framework and how it's modeled within Smartsettle Infinity. This now represents a very well-defined problem, and as John Dewey said, a well-defined problem is already half solved. Now we're going to simulate solving the other half of the problem, reaching an optimal consensus among 6 parties while their communication is facilitated within the Smartsettle Infinity interface. This is the private point of view of the Palestinian leadership. The other 5 parties are being played by a robot. In a real-life negotiation, the Palestinians would work with skilled facilitators to model their preferences within Infinity. In this simulation, we simulated that process by recruiting AI to help us determine their preferences and those of each of the other 6 parties from information on the internet. Each party's preferences are kept confidential by the system, known only ever to that party, their facilitators, and to Smartsettle at an invisible and secure neutral site. The simulation generates a unique outcome, shaped by the collective preferences of all stakeholders. However, the key lesson here isn't the outcome, but the consensus-building process itself. The negotiating range on each issue here is oriented so that the most preferred options to the Palestinians are on the right-hand side. The entire list is in order of preference, from most important at the top to least important at the bottom. With the Palestinians required to pay only a relatively small portion of the costs, the importance of the cost issue is quite low, although not insignificant. The non-linear shape of the curve indicates that it becomes more difficult for the Palestinians to pay as the amount increases. Palestinians have assigned one importance point to the negotiating range from 0 to 100 million. This establishes the importance scale for all the other issues. The most important issue, worth 60 points, is prisoner exchange and refugee resettlement. This satisfaction graph shows 6 alternative outcomes, ranked by the Palestinian leadership. Their least preferred option, scoring -20, is international support resettlement. Several other options are much better, with the most preferred option being simultaneous complete release at 40 points. Recognition of sovereign borders and reconstruction and economic revival are also among the most important issues. Commitment to ceasefire, of course, is also very important, but this issue is assigned fewer points here because the negotiations have already assumed that a ceasefire will happen. The only issue about a ceasefire is how it will be implemented. There are 6 options in order of importance, from phased peace implementation to immediate full ceasefire. On the right side is where the Palestinians keep track of alternative outcomes. There is nothing yet on the table for all parties to see. The Palestinian leadership have created 5 private reference packages to help them understand their own preferences, and also for use in the bargaining phase about to begin. The ratings of these packages are determined by the individual importances assigned to the options that make up the package. The package least preferred to the Palestinians, worth only 7 points, is named status quo. An outcome at this end of the scale would be totally unacceptable. The Palestinians will walk away from the table before accepting anything worse than their walkaway package. Their goal is a solution worth at least 180 points. The package named Target would be quite acceptable to the Palestinians. However, the Palestinians decide to start by proposing something more optimistic. When they do so, the optimistic proposals of the other parties also appear on the table. Among those proposals, the one submitted by people at the heart of the conflict is most preferred, and the Palestinians readily accept that package. Their acceptance is indicated by a secret yellow dot. Other parties are unaware that the Palestinians have accepted Package 3. The Palestinians also accept Package 4. There are more packages acceptable to the Palestinians, but before accepting any of those, the Palestinians ask Smartsettle for a suggestion. Several suggestions appear. These packages not only fill in the gaps between the proposals, but are designed to be semi-optimal and draw the parties toward an optimal consensus. Before dealing with these suggestions, they accept Package 5. Among the suggestions generated by Smartsettle, Suggestion 15 looks most interesting and is accepted by the Palestinians. Smartsettle will declare an agreement if, at the end of a session, all parties have accepted the same package. Unfortunately, no agreement is reached in Session 1. In Session 2, the Palestinians decide to propose their concession package and also accept a few other packages. No agreement is reached in Session 2. In Session 3, the Palestinians decide to put their target package on the table, but they do so in secret. This is done by publishing the package anonymously. The target package is disguised as a typical suggestion. This strategic move is known as a masquerade. This technique helps to remove bias that would prevent other parties from accepting such a package. At the close of Session 3, the Palestinians are thrilled when Package 15 is declared the baseline agreement, surpassing their target expectations. The excitement is palpable, but with their training on Infinity's ability to uncover hidden value, an improvement is requested. Smartsettle generates Package 23, which becomes the final agreement after all parties confirm that it is even better than the baseline. This moment highlights the transformative power of the Smartsettle Infinity process, uniting parties and achieving surprising outcomes beyond their expectations. The improvement is worth 9 points more to the Palestinians than the baseline agreement. And in fact, if we were to also view this negotiation from each other party's perspective, we would see that the improvement was worth a grand sum of $6 billion overall. This optimized consensus would cost an estimated $24 billion, but the mutual benefit to all stakeholders is 7 times greater, at $171 billion. What are we waiting for? Did you catch what happened? Let's review the process by examining a graph in satisfaction space, which illustrates how parties were able to move toward a mutually beneficial solution, ultimately achieving a level of consensus previously thought unattainable. This graph assumes that a comprehensive single negotiating framework has been created, and each party's preferences are well represented, known only to the Smartsettle Infinity neutral site. The stage is set for the integrative bargaining phase of a Smartsettle negotiation. The animation here will show how the bargaining phase works for two parties, Palestine and Israel in this case. Palestine wants an outcome as close to the top as possible, 100% on the vertical scale, and Israel wants an outcome that is as far to the right as possible, 100% on the horizontal scale. Clearly, they will need to settle for something less than that, but each party will not agree to anything worse than the status quo, so we've labeled that point as 0-0. In game theory, the status quo is also called the Nash equilibrium, if it's a place where decision makers get stuck and have no incentive to move to a better place, even if that better place exists. This is especially serious if the Nash equilibrium is dangerous. The status quo levels, together with the efficiency frontier, define a zone of possible agreement. But each party also has a minimum level of satisfaction that they would be willing to accept. These levels define a zone of likely agreement. The Smartsettle process proceeds as follows. Parties are encouraged to exchange optimistic proposals that represent somewhat more than they would consider fair, so that they still have some room to concede, but not so much more that the other party is offended. In this example, neither party would accept the other party's optimistic because they are both outside the zone of possible agreement. But Smartsettle can generate suggestions that fall between the optimistic proposals. Some of these packages fall in the zone of possible agreement and may be acceptable to the parties. The suggestions most likely to become an agreement are the ones that are above the target levels. Parties reach a baseline agreement at the end of a session if they have all accepted the same package. Finally, Smartsettle generates an improvement to suggest a fair solution on the efficiency frontier. This last step invokes our signature algorithm, maximize the minimum gain, that some authorities on this subject prefer to Nash's solution. But it does the same thing, providing parties a way to escape the Nash equilibrium and reach a fair and efficient solution on the efficiency frontier. By definition, any solution on the efficiency frontier is as good as you can get. There is no way to make it any better for one party without making it worse for some other party. The Smartsettle process works for almost any formal negotiation that you can imagine between any number of parties. When adding a third party like the West, the efficiency frontier becomes a surface. This has the potential to tremendously complicate the negotiations. But with Smartsettle, the parties never see most of this. It's all under the hood. Each party needs only to focus on their own point of view, and their experience in a multi-party negotiation is not much different than with only two parties. The final outcome is a consensus in which the blanks in the single negotiating framework are filled in to become the final agreement to be implemented. We have some good videos illustrating this process. Email us for the links if you can't find them on our website. I'd like to leave you with this. The amount of money the world spends on peacemaking is minuscule compared to the costs of war. If we moved over only a quarter of that, we would have enough to accomplish all the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, and there'd still be $6 trillion left. Imagine how much more could be done if we were able to motivate collaboration the way we've shown you today. Peace is within reach. We invite decision makers, stakeholders, and supporters to help make this vision a reality. Building a future where Gaza is rebuilt, restored, and truly at peace. Thanks for watching.